Park Chan-wook is a highly fascinating director in the sense that he pretty much tells the exact same story in all of his films, but always manages to make each new iteration feel unique and interesting. His direction has a clear focus on romance, lust, and relationships, and these are topics that are explored within pretty much all of his films, but are always explored in a uniquely morbid way. I honestly just hope this dude is okay for making so many films about fucked up romances. Some of his highlights include Oldboy. I mean, which, come on, it's Oldboy. This is by far his most iconic film, and is a must-watch for anyone that wants a starting off point to his filmography. This film is also just a true amalgamation of every aspect of Park Chan-wook's style. The Handmaiden is an erotic love story told through the lens of an extremely weird love triangle, consisting of some truly mind-boggling plot beats and narrative subversions. Thirst, which is probably my favorite of his films, is a truly wild story of the aberrant relationship between a woman with a desire to love and a priest who becomes a vampire. And then there's Park's latest film, Decision to Leave, yet another twisted love story from this director, following a police detective who is investigating a suspicious death on a mountaintop. However, the real story begins when he starts interrogating the deceased man's wife, who is also the primary suspect of the murder. The film swiftly falls into a dark account of longing as our protagonist finds himself attracted to the women and spirals into unhealthy obsession. And although rehashing many of the director's signature traits, this film is still unique in many terms of its storytelling and consists of the most exciting directing and cinematography of the year. It is a film that dissects its main characters through a grand sense of environment, exploring the trenches of their love through the likes of technology and territory. So the first aspect I want to dissect within this film is technology. While it isn't as predominant as the second point I'll be talking about, it's still a very important part to this film. This is a film that owns the fact that it's set in our modern era and has some of the most authentic portrayals of current technology in media. Many films that are set during the modern day just don't feel like accurate representations of the way that we currently live. Many of these films feel the need to create fake versions of apps and use some shitty graphics on screen to show what people are typing. You know exactly what films I'm talking about. It's used in like every single Netflix and teen drama ever. Decision to Leave strips all that away and is able to feel authentic to how a real person would use a phone and how a real person would interact with modern technology around them. I can happily say that the decision to leave those aspects out of the film just made it ever so realistic and genuine. There are no fake apps like fucking Search It or Snapgram, and people use cell phones in realistic ways, not only in the context of communication, but also for looking at pictures, recording audio, and searching for information. The film uses amazing visuals to showcase how technology is ingrained in everyone's lives nowadays, but never frames it as a mind-washing parasite. This is important because technology is more than just phones. It's a part of almost everything we interact with around us, and this film understands that it plays a big role in our modern world. For a picture that has a great display of the uses of technology, it only makes sense that this film is an outstanding technical achievement of its own, and it surely is, because I mean, holy fuck. Like, holy fuck. Like, holy fuck. There are shots in this film that feel like they were almost impossible to achieve. The visual elements of this film feel so fluid and alive. The shot composition and framing in this film are amazing. It feels like every piece was choreographed and storyboarded perfectly. There are some highly pleasing scene transitions and perspective shots within this film, which again highlight the technical themes, but just in general feel so alive and fun from a presentation standpoint. The cinematography is something that also manages to beautifully capture the second aspect of this film that I want to talk about, which is of course territory. Now, when I refer to territory, I am mainly focusing on the environment and scenery and natural expression of this film. In all honesty, I just wanted to find a catchy word to put in the title beside technology. However, this film does actually relate to territory in terms of countries and cities and provinces, specifically in the sense that the film plays with multiple uses of culture in different areas of Korea, as well as different uses of languages in general. Hae-jun, the leading police detective, is Korean, and Seo-rae, the leading woman, is Chinese, and the film plays with translation and dialects in a very interesting way. But that's not what I'm here to talk about, because I am not Asian and I have absolutely no clue how to speak a word of Korean or Chinese. I'm here to primarily talk about the scenic elements this film has to offer, which is one of its primary themes. The film has a grand focus on its environment and perspective of nature. From the poster alone, we can see that there is a clear focus on the mountain and the sea, a theme this film will continue to drive home immensely, from the tallest mountain to the lowest sea. There's definitely a thematic purpose for why we start off the trail of deaths on top of the mountain and end below at the waves of the sea. Just like how this film presents technology in a visually interesting way, it does the exact same with its scenery, showcasing the environment in a truly immaculate way. There are beautiful shots of the mountains and oceans that express their serene beauty. While technology is always shown close up, the scenery is mostly shown from far away, highlighting its difference in appreciation compared to technology. The environment is something we always appreciate from afar. It's enormous in scale, but the way we view it is small and distant, while technology is commonly around us and is something we are constantly viewing in close proximity. There are great visual techniques highlighting the scenic elements of this film. The way the height of building is presented is mirrored, but cracked up to the max when we reach the top of the mountain, showcasing the true heights and scale of the different peaks. The cinematography in itself feels like an ocean in the sense that sometimes it's still and gentle, sometimes it feels as if it's floating and bobbing, and sometimes it feels like it's unhinged, as if it's flowing and spiraling. While both of these themes have clear intent on how they are conveyed visually, now it's time to talk about how these contrasting elements relate to each other in terms of the greater themes of the story, and that is of course explored through the main characters. Hae-jun is clearly meant to represent the technological aspects of the film. I mean, he's a police detective. He is constantly using gadgets and tech during his work, in his everyday life, and even to escape from perilous situations. He definitely has a clear knowledge and understanding when using different gear and devices, which makes perfect sense considering his occupation. However, technology has a way greater impact on his life than it may seem. The guy quite literally relies on technology to see, and quite literally relies on technology to sleep, to gain a sense of rest and comfort. Also, I don't know where else to talk about this in the video, but I think there definitely is an important aspect to why he uses eye drops, a saline solution, which relates to salt water and the sea. It definitely relates to one of the themes of the story, but I didn't know where to throw this little analysis in, so I'm just dumping it here. But out of these many aspects, the most important thing Hae-jun relies on technology on is his connection to Seo-rae. The importance of technology shines as Hae-jun uses it to communicate with her. He uses it to listen to her and record her. He uses it to gain that feeling of being close to her, to keep her, whether through recordings of her voice, pictures he's taken of her, or even just through sight alone. He uses technology to gain this feeling of being in her close proximity. And while he uses all these technological aspects to gain a sense of intimacy with her, it's through technology that he also unravels the mystery, and discovers the evidence that Seo-rae did in fact murder her husband. Speaking of Seo-rae, Her place in the story is clearly meant to represent the scenic aspects of the film. I mean, she quite literally kicks off the film's mystery by murdering her husband by pushing him off a mountain. But she in fact strongly dislikes mountains and even claims that she hates them and has a fear of heights.
남편은 산에 가자고. 난 산 싫다고.
So within this film, while feeling way more naturalistic, Seo-rae is primarily meant to represent the sea. She brings up a quote from Confucius that states,
공자님 말씀에 지혜로운 자는 물을 좋아하고 인자한 자는 산을 좋아한다고 했습니다. 난 인자한 사람이 아닙니다. 난 바다가 좋아요.
She specifically explains that she feels that she aligns more with the sea, and the film also drives this theme home in many other ways. Throughout the whole thing, she is almost always wearing at least one piece of blue or grey or turquoise clothing. Her wallpaper and storybook share a pattern that resembles the ocean, suggesting that her home is the ocean, and her place of cherished memories and thoughts is the ocean. Even her backstory relates to the ocean, and even in the present, she is constantly making metaphors and mentioning aspects that relate to the sea.
이젠 바다로 가요. 물로 들어가요. 당신은 해파리예요.
And if that isn't enough, I think this beautiful overhead shot sells it all, as we can see a figure of a woman's portrait in the waves, suggesting that she quite literally is a visual representation of the sea. This shot is also just a neat little way to highlight the contrast between nature and technology. On the left we see a car and a road, which seems to be distinctly separated from the sand and the ocean. So all in all, Seo-rae is quite literally a product of the sea, which makes total sense why she will eventually be taken by it. And you're probably wondering, if these two characters are connected on a personal level, then how do they both represent opposite ends of the spectrum? Well, what happens when you mix a cell phone and the water? It breaks. And that's exactly what happens to their romance. When Hae-jun figures out that Seo-rae was responsible for her husband's death, he doesn't arrest her. He rather tells her to take the cell phone containing the evidence and throw it into the deep sea.
저 폰은 바다에 버려요. 깊은 데 빠뜨려서 아무도 못 찾게 해요.
And while he does let her off the hook because of obvious care and compassion for her, this is the scene that still sparks his decision to leave. They were a relationship consisting of opposite ends of the spectrum, and when technology met water, their relationship ended. Well, at least for the first part of the film, because now this is where the mountain comes into play. After the big decision to leave happens, Hae-jun relocates to a new town and starts to become a lot more traditional and scenic, trying to change up his lifestyle after his tragic falling out with Seo-rae. But it's because of her that he went down this path to become more scenic in the first place. As he desired to be with her, he decided to try share this hidden love for the ocean. However, he was left rejected by the sea multiple times. Earlier in the film, he tries to express that he's a man of the sea, but his wife reminds him that no, he was born in Seoul, a landlocked city filled with mostly sprawling cityscapes and highland mountains. There's a scene showing him cutting up fish, which leads to another scene later showing how the sea is literally biting back at him when he catches a goon that steals a bunch of turtles. And with all that, I mean, the sea is literally the place where he loses Seo-rae. If that's not the biggest indication of why the sea is against this dude, then I don't know what is. The world gives Hae-jun these signs that he isn't in fact a man of the sea, because he much rather relates to the likes of the mountain. I feel like as this film goes on, it gradually gives us metaphors for why he represents the mountain. He also does very much represent technology. I mean, mountains are way more technologically related to the human world than oceans. We've conquered almost all the highest peaks, but we're nowhere close to uncovering the darker secrets of the deepest oceans. I think it's the point where Hae-jun reaches the summit where things start to shift towards him, becoming more of a representation of the mountain. Throughout the film, there are small nods towards this, such as creating scenarios where Hae-jun ends up at the top of buildings, creating that feeling of climbing and height. These scenes also provide little nods to the place where he will solve the big mystery, as all of his other big confrontations take place at the highest point of the building. It's when Hae-jun starts to become more interested with Seo-rae that he starts to become more happier and high on life, like that feeling of conquering a peak. It just makes sense that Hae-jun is meant to represent the mountain once he himself starts to become more adapted and in tune with his surroundings. He's a seasoned cop of an elder age. He's rigid and cold, and even states that his body is stiff. He has lived a repetitive life and has been in a long marriage of 16 years, and he wouldn't have changed if it weren't for Seo-rae. He only began to change when the sea came to him. Seo-rae is younger and unpredictable and a fresh addition to his life, just like the ocean. And it's that middle point of the film that entirely recontextualizes their romance. Hae-jun decides to move on and embrace a life with no change, embrace the life of the mountain, an old stationary object that will rarely ever change shape, unless in contact with the sea. It's in that middle point of the film that triggers Seo-rae's passion and series of twisted events to win Hae-jun back. When your love ended, my love began.
你说爱我的瞬间，你的爱就结束了。你的爱结束的瞬间，我的爱就开始了。
The sea is able to morph objects that it interacts with, and it's when Seo-rae comes to Hae-jun, she is able to change how he feels, and cause him to regain the sense of obsession and longing for her. The mountain is a place where Hae-jun experiences his greatest personal connection with Seo-rae, but it's also the place that provided him with the evidence that caused him to distance himself from her in the first place. And it's these conflicting elements that begs the question that maybe technology and water aren't meant to be. But what about the mountain and the sea? And well, the answer is still no. These two characters are on opposite ends of the spectrum that just weren't meant to be. No matter how much love and care they had for one another, their relationship was still twisted and toxic, causing them both to become obsessive and unhealthy. Maybe what they had was some weird, fucked up form of true love. But it's true love that was never going to work out. Because what happens when you put together a mountain and the sea? Well, the mountain erodes. This leads us to the end of the film, where we experience Seo-rae's decision to leave, taking her own life through the means of the sea. I think it's this shot that perfectly sums everything up. Here we see the constantly flowing ocean next to an eroded coastal landform, symbolizing that even though the sea is majestic, it still forever causes damage, even to the sturdiest of structures like rock and stone. It will wash away everything in its path, it will leave no evidence, and it will forever represent something that is vast and unfathomable. Seo-rae was a figment of the sea, in a relationship that was never going to be explored to its greatest depths. This final shot as we watch Hae-jun unknowingly stand upon Seo-rae's seabed grave is truly heartbreaking. Even though this film was all about these characters' deranged love story, it still proves that even the furthest of opposites can find a way to attract, whether that be for the better or for the worse. You still genuinely cared for these characters' bonds and hardships, despite this twisted romantic web they got themselves stuck in. In this final shot, we see Hae-jun struggling as the sea knocks him down and overcomes him, a representation of technology, now shattered and broken by these waves, but also a representation of the mountain, standing over the sea as it slowly breaks him apart. He stands above Seo-rae as she drowns in her inevitable watery grave. Watching him desperately search for her is so harrowing and haunting, the sea rejecting him one last time in the most despondent of ways. This death is something that will continue to affect him for the rest of his life, a true tragedy that will continue to wear him down until eventually he erodes away himself.